Lamed Vav Amud Aleph, and it's probably about 12 lines from the top. Gufa, that's where it starts. There's a 2 dots in it's the first word on the line. Gufa. Okay, so we thank Hashem. We learn Torah every day. It's close to our learning. We should have the Beis Hamikdash immediately. Okay, we were talking about someone that took a vow that his friend can't have any benefit from it. Took a mudar hana. He forbids benefit from his to his friend. Now, what is he allowed to do for his friend that's not considered benefit? So we mentioned that he can take truma for him. We mentioned that if he's a kohen, he can also bring sacrifices for him. But we said that it was only specific sacrifices that are mechusar kapara, that it allows the person that's bringing, it allows the person that the sacrifice is being brought for on his behalf to then go and eat from kachim, from other sacrifices. So it finishes the purification process if the person was impure or if they had a birth. Okay. Rabbi Yochanan, we used Rabbi Yochanan to explain why this was allowed, because Rabbi Yochanan said that normally a sacrifice, you have to bring it with the intention of the owner. In other words, the owner has to send you to bring it. He has to know that you're bringing it on his behalf, which means that if the owner is sending you, then you're doing it on his behalf, then that would be giving him benefit. But over here, because the owner doesn't have to send you, and you can just do it on your own, so it's not considered giving him benefit. Okay, so let's see this again. Amr Gufa. We learned before, Amr Rabbi Yochanan, Gufa is a term that's used whenever we re-examine a statement from Amirayim that was said before. Amr Rabbi Yochanan, Akol Tzrichim Das. Everything needs intention. In other words, all sacrifices require intention of the person that it's being brought on his behalf. That he has to send the person, or he has to, it has to be with his acknowledgement that the sacrifice is being brought, except for if it's the conclusion of a purification process, where the one that it's being brought on his behalf, he does not need das that it's being brought. Someone just bring it without telling him. What's our proof for that? It says the proof is because from chusr kapara, to complete the purification process, a person can bring a sacrifice even for his children, son or daughter that are minors, that are not able to have intent. And what we're going to do now is we're going to use a term that's called danin efsher mishi efsher. Efsher means impossible, like ain efsher. The sacrifice could be brought on his behalf. Obviously, it's not a sin offering because a child wouldn't have to bring a sin offering. What type of offering is it? We're talking about mechusar kapara, that it's the completion of a purification process. Now, the child doesn't have intent. The child can't have intent. He's just a child. So, being that we see that a person can bring a sacrifice for a mechusar kapara without intent, where do we see that? Where it's impossible by the child. So if that's the case, where you can bring it for a child, then you could bring it also for an adult without intent. How do we get that we can bring it for an adult without intent? Because if you can bring it for a child, you can bring it for an adult. Now you can ask a question like this, but for the child, it was impossible to have intent. But for the adult where it's possible, then maybe you do require intent. Gemara is saying, or Rabbi Yochanan was understanding, that done in efsher mishi efsher. We can derive when it's possible to have intent. We can derive that rule that it's going to be acceptable without intent from a person where it's impossible to have intent from the child. We can derive one from the other. Okay. Elamiata, where it says if that's the case, if you're going to say that you can learn out a case where it's possible to have intent from a case where it's impossible to have intent, and say that both of them are acceptable. You don't need intent, because the case where it was impossible, it was acceptable. If that's the case,
It seem like they're like same like apples and apples, like because one has the capability of having intent and one doesn't.
Right. But we're seeing that when there's no capability of having intent, it's still acceptable.
Yeah.
So we're understanding that you don't require intent. That's the way we're looking at it. It's true. There is another way of looking at it. That over there you don't require intent because it's not possible. That's the other way of looking at it. But apparently Rabbi Yochanan was going to look at it like this. How do we see that? Because he says that you can bring a sacrifice on behalf of someone that needed to complete his purification process, and he learns it from a child. Okay. If this is the case, why can't a person bring a sin offering for his friend? He said that a person can bring a sacrifice for his wife. And his wife, we're talking about his wife, where his wife is not mentally competent. And obviously, she doesn't have intent, right? But he can bring it on her behalf. And if that's the case, where it's impossible, you can bring it. Should also be acceptable. Where it is possible, you should be allowed to bring it. Should be able to bring a sin offering for his friend, even in a case where really the friend should be sending him, or should be sending the sacrifice. He could do it without his friend's intention. Okay, so the Gemara said, the Gemara is going to challenge this. Why did we have a statement from Rabbi Elazar that if you bring a sin offering, it's called chatas chelev. Chatas is a sin offering, and chelev is the forbidden fat. If you bring a sin offering for your friend, it's nothing, if without the friend's intention. Why do we learn that it's nothing? If you can bring it for the wife doesn't have intention because she's not mentally competent. She can't have intention. So it should also work for the friend, even though he is mentally competent and he should be able to, but we see that it's not necessary. Umar says, what was the case that you're bringing this from? That you want to say that since done in Efshe Mishi Efshe, we can learn from the impossible also to the possible. So we can learn from the wife to a regular friend. You should be able to bring the sacrifice. What was the case of the wife? Are we talking about that she ate chelev? Chelev is the forbidden fat. That's the example that's used for the chatas in the sin. If the wife ate when she was not mentally competent, shaita, how to say that? Labbas karbani. She can't. She's not eligible to bring a sacrifice anyway, because she's not even responsible for mitzvahs. She's a shaita. She's not mentally competent. You can't require her. You can't have any obligations on her. What you bring a sacrifice for? Maybe she did the sin when she was healthy. She was competent. But then before she brought the sacrifice, she became incompetent. Became a shaitan. Amar Rabbi Yirmiyah, Amar Rabbi Bavo, Amar Rabbi Yochanan, Achal chelev ifresh karban v'nishtata v'chasa v'nishtapa pasal. Hayol v'nitcha yitcha. It's interesting. We have a rule of dachi, where something gets pushed away from being eligible, and then it comes back to being eligible. So we have a rule that if there was a person that was obligated to bring a sacrifice, but then he went crazy, became not mentally competent, and then he comes back, you say that he doesn't have to bring the sacrifice from before, because there was a moment in time when he was exempt from that, and once he's exempt, it's considered dachi. It's pushed away, and it doesn't come back to being eligible.
Regains his sanity.
Even though he regains his sanity, but it's still puzzle. Now, usually this is said by the sacrifice itself, but once the sacrifice, here we're using it on the person, unless it's talking about that he designated a sacrifice, then the sacrifice becomes invalid, and then he comes back. But I also thought that we said that there's no dichoy from a Baal Chai, that we had a Gemara like that. the animal's alive, you can't say that it's or something. And anyway, here we're talking about what it seems like. So we're talking about that the person was eligible to bring a sacrifice, then it becomes not eligible. Now he comes back to be eligible. We say that's already pushed off. It's already rejected from having to bring a sacrifice. So that can't be the case. Can't be the case where the woman was healthy, the wife was healthy, and then she became incompetent, that he should have to bring a sacrifice for her. So what is the case? So the case is, obviously, that it wasn't a sin offering. We're only talking about a mechusar kapara, that it was the conclusion of a purification process. If that's the case, then we're back to the din of Rabbi Yochanan. We have no other source that a person can bring a sin offering for anyone. That's how we answer the question. Yeah, all of that is missing from the text. The Gemara expects you to understand all of that.
Isn't it like one of the most important part is like the kavanah?
Yeah.
Like, I understand for her that's not competent, and for the baby, because it's impossible. But for one that it is, like how.
Right. It's a good question.
And then it reminds me of kind of like the whole vow thing. Like if the husband knows the vow for the wife and she doesn't know about it, it's like it still stands.
Right.
So if he or she doesn't know that the sacrifice was done, it's like she's still impure.
Yeah. Now, the comparison is not perfect, because with the vow, when the husband or father annuls the vow, she thinks that the vow is still there, and then she violates it on purpose. Then, in her mind, she's sinning, and that's also a type of sin that requires atonement. Here, what we're looking at is that there is a process to rectifying the sin. We're thinking that that process could be fulfilled by anyone bringing the sacrifice. Yeah, that's what we're thinking. The mechanism for the sin to go up, for the atonement is being done.
I think that part I understand, but that she doesn't have to be aware.
And she doesn't have to be aware because she wasn't able to be aware.
No,
We're thinking that that should apply even to someone that is competent, that is able to be aware. Look, someone has a ticket of some sort. He has to go to court for the ticket. So he has to find someone to, a lawyer or something. Let's say the lawyer doesn't tell the person, he just takes care of it on his own. It worked, no?
Yeah, but how is the lawyer is not going to receive the ticket. We're going to send the lawyer.
He looked through the computer files. He took care of it on his own. It's himself. The guy didn't know, but it's fine. That's what we're looking at here. Someone's going to bring the sacrifice, and the person doesn't know about it. Okay, well, we're actually not holding over there now. We're holding that it's only applicable that this could happen in a case where it's a completion of a purification process. So what was with the woman? She probably gave birth. And then we said that the husband can bring the sacrifice. For what type of sacrifice does he bring? It depends. If he's wealthy, he has to bring the expensive one. If this is the case, back to Danan Efshar Mishi Efshar. If you think that you can derive the rule of someone that's possible to have intent from someone that's not possible to have intent, if that's the case, in Yavi Adam Pesach al Chaveri, person should be able to bring a Pesach offering for his friend, just like he can bring a Pesach offering for his children. Now, obviously, his children don't have intention that they're signed up to a certain sacrifice. By the way, the Pesach offering works is that you're supposed to sign up. It's called minuyin. But you have to be counted in for this. Which sacrifice do you belong to? You have to belong to a certain one. So that would require intent from the people which sacrifice they belong to. But a person can bring a sacrifice for his sons, even though they don't have intent. If that's the case, if you see that intent isn't important, so that means you should be able to do it for other people. So So why does Rabbi Elazar say that if you separate a sacrifice for your friend, you didn't do anything? A Pesach sacrifice. You see, you can do it for the children, and if you can learn from the children that should apply everywhere else, like Rabbi Yechanan did with Machusha Kapara. So we should also apply it to a Pesach. Insane? Not over here. I think that was discussed in the Gemara Chagiga. It gave like three possibilities of what would make someone insane. Sleeping in the cemetery, something, burning, destroying their own clothing. And then we had some other discussions about, we have something about being able to do a mission and return. It was something like that.
Always going to eat free salad.
That's insane. Okay. What is considered insane in American? Do they still have that thing that you can make believe you're insane and then you get off the hook from crimes and stuff? Still do that?
Murderers do it all the time.
Oh. Uh-huh. And intent means that you have to know that you're doing it, or that you.
That's Officer Long.
So what is insane in American?
Different definitions. One is you person who can't tell the difference between right and wrong. Another is
That's almost everyone.
action is the product of the diseased mind. I
Uh-huh.
don't know what that means. They're different
Okay.
formulations to describe it.
So you get a doctor to a psychiatrist or something.
In Israel, who is this that's taking the position that because a parent has certain rights with respect to his child, that you can learn from that the rights of somebody's unrelated to?
Right.
Who's taking this position?
This is the Stamma de Talmuda. This is just the Gemara itself that's doing this.
So it's the common.
Yeah, they call it
the editor.
Yeah. Who is the Stamma de Talmuda? It's the Amiraim. People around the times of the Amiraim. If you ask, the Professor Halivni, so it's the people after the Gemara. It's the Rabbanan Savarai or something. That was what the modern scholars say. Yeah. Anyway. So we have to figure out, why is it that you can't bring a Pesach offering for your friend, but you can bring a Pesach offering for your children? For the children, they don't have to know, and for the friend does have to know. Why is it like that? If you can learn from if you can learn from people that it's impossible to people that it's possible, then we should have a perfect comparison there. That you shouldn't have to have, the friend shouldn't need intent. Amar Reb Zera says, "Celebe sabis lav deraisa." But this expression is a little difficult. What it means to say is that when it says you bring a house, you bring a lamb for the family, for the father's house, this doesn't mean that all the members of the father's house are all minuyin. They actually don't need to be minuyin. You can bring it for them. So the lav deraisa means that they're not considered minuyin. They're not considered counted in. So the celebe savos, that's going to work even though they're not counted in. So this is a special halacha that will apply to the Karban Pesach, that you can bring for your own children. They don't need to be minuyin, but this is definitely not going to apply for bringing a sacrifice for someone else. Umimai, how do you know this? Look at the Mishnah that we have. Someone says to his sons, whichever one of you makes it first to Yerushalayim will be included in my Karban Pesach. So yeah, the race. They're going to race. Once the first person enters in, just his head and majority of his body, through the gate. So so he acquires his portion, and guess what? His brothers also get their portion together with him. So even though the father didn't actually include the brothers in this, he only said the one that comes first, but the brothers are going to get their portion as well. If they say they need to be counted in for the sacrifice, as designated in which sacrifice they belong to, al bisr koyim azakilo. How does this brother get them their sacrifice? Is he standing over? He's standing over the flesh. In other words, they have to be counted in while the animal is alive, not after the animal is shechted. This son makes it in. They shech the animal, and he acquires it for them that didn't even make it there.
Why don't they bring the raya from Yiftach's daughter, who was alive?
Yeah.
She was the korban.
Oh,
She ended up being shechted, and God asked all the middle questions.
You don't do human sacrifice.
I didn't say we do it now, but look at the questions here in the Gemara. It's kind of just change words. Somebody who didn't know about it, someone who's still alive.
No, he could have gotten away with it. Could have annulled it and do all that stuff. He didn't.
Right.
That's good too.
Did you understand the question?
What are you saying? That he should have annulled the vow?
No, we're just saying here that it automatically happened. They were included, the brothers, because they were still alive. They didn't know about it. Was all this criteria. I'm saying that was also the same criteria about the raya.
Not just a pretty face, not just that.
Yiftach's daughter. Okay.
Is that a book, Yiftach's daughter? Is that a...
No, Jethro told.
Okay. Okay, so there's different ways of learning what the Gemara's question over here is, but it could be that the question is that how does the son acquire it, or get this? It's not really an acquisition. It's how does he acquire it on behalf of the brothers after it's already shechted?
Why they raise?
Oh, 1 second. So why did the father, if all the brothers are going to get it, so why did the father have to tell them the one that comes first? He wanted to hurry them up to do mitzvahs, to encourage them. You have a brayso that's similar to this. It's a story. The daughters came before the sons. That it turns out that the daughters were more serious about the mitzvahs and the sons were lazy. I guess what we're going to see from this is always the case, right? What we're going to see from this is that because all the sons were able to eat at that case, so they don't need to be counted in for the Korban Pesach if they're part of the family. The children themselves don't need to be counted in. So you can't bring a proof from the fact that the children are counted in, that therefore you should be able to bring a sacrifice for other people. Yeah. What are we left with over here? That Rabbi Yochanan does have a case of done an efshar mishi efshar, but when we tried to compare it to everything else, we weren't able to do it. That's what came out. Okay.
This was all to help us understand if somebody could do something that benefits the person. Vow that he should not have that.
Right. That the kohen can bring the sacrifice without him knowing.
Oh, throw out the Yiftach story. That wasn't for her benefit.
Right. Okay. Now it says v'tayr mes trumais of chulu. One of the things that a person that took the vow can do is that he can take truma for the other person, even though he's not supposed to give that person benefit, but he can actually take truma for him. Ibailu. They have a question. We're on top of 36b. Let's say someone takes truma for his friend's produce. Does he have to tell his friend about it or not? Now, who's he taking the truma from? Well, here the case is he's taking it from his own produce. He's separating his own produce for his friend on behalf of his friend. His friend was out in the market, whatever, comes back on his way home. His neighbor, I don't know, his neighbor says, I was separating truma. I saw you had a whole silo over there full of grain. I separated truma for you as well. While he was away, while he was out at the market. So mi amrina, do we say given this chusulai? Like tzarich das. We have a rule, zachan ladam shlei b'fanav. You can give a gift to someone as long as the gift has no detriment to it. You can give a gift to him even without him knowing about it. So you can give it to your friend and say, acquire this on behalf of Shimon, and Shimon owns it. It's his, it becomes his. As long as there's no detriment to owning that, something illegal or something, he would say, I don't want, then he would have to know about it. But if there's no detriment, that's fine. So do we say that when he separates truma, that's considered like gifting him something, and there's no detriment to it? Or do we say, or do we say that there is a detriment to it because there's the mitzvah that's performed by separating the truma, because this person took the mitzvah away from him, so that's considered a detriment. He would have liked to have performed the mitzvah on his own. Do we say that the truma works? Is this considered zachin or is this considered chavan? Chavan is the detriment. You can't cause someone a detriment with a disadvantage without his knowledge. So Tashema, we quote our Mishnah. When someone takes a vow that he's not going to give his friend any benefit. No, he's not going to get any benefit from it. He said that he's allowed to take truma on behalf of his friend, and he's allowed to do ma'aser. The Mayaskina, what's the case? Ilema, it's supposed to be shel balakri, al shel balakri. Are we saying that he's taking the produce? Let's say Reuven took the vow that Shimon can't have benefit from. Now Reuven goes ahead to Shimon's produce, separates some of the grain, and says that this grain is truma. It says that he can do this ledaita. Ledaita demand. Daita means with intention. Whose intention? Ilema ledaita delay. If you say he does it with his own intention, so Reuven is the only one that knows about this. Reuven's going into this friend's property that is not allowed to have benefit from separating the truma. Man shavi shliach. We have a rule that truma needs to be done by the owner, and the owner can make a shliach to do it. But who made him the shliach? How did it work in the case before? The case before, he was taking his own grain. Here he's taking the grain of his friend. So who made him a shliach to do that, to separate the truma? Ella l'daita de balakri. It must be that the person knows about it. Shimon knows that Reuven is going to separate the truma, and he agrees to it. So hakamahanile, the kavach lichuse. But if he agrees to it, then that's considered a benefit. When you appoint someone to do something and he fulfills that appointment, so then that's considered getting benefit. Reuven wasn't allowed to give Shimon benefit. Ella mishaloi al shel balakri, I guess. Rather, it must be the case is that he's taking his own grain, Reuven's own grain, separating it on behalf of Shimon. And that's why he doesn't need to be made a shliach, uladaita deman. But whose intent? It says for intention. Whose intention? If we say that the balakri, the owner of the grain, which means Shimon, which was not allowed to have benefit from him, appointed him to do it, then we're back to the problem. Reuven wasn't allowed to give benefit to Shimon, and if he's going to fulfill his appointment, then that would be giving a benefit. It must be that it means that he's allowed to do it with his own intent. Pretty clear, that he's allowed to take truma from his own grain on behalf of his friend, and it's considered the zachanla. It's considered like a benefit for him. Now, what we would say here is that although it's a benefit for him for the truma, but it's not enough of a benefit for the neder. We're going to be dividing these laws in a very difficult division, distinction. That it's a type of benefit that only would work for the truma, because you can't do something on someone's behalf that's not to his benefit. So it would have to be considered to his benefit. But this person took a vow that he won't give benefit to his friend. So regarding the vow, it's not considered a benefit, and it's no problem. Regarding the truma, we consider it a benefit, and it's considered zachin. It's not considered hana, but it's considered zachin. That's how we would divide it. Now, the way the Bach reads the next piece is v'yamrit mishalei teirem al shel chaveroi tzarich das. But if you would say back to the question that you asked originally, can someone take truma for his friend without his intent? And the answer would be no. If he would only be allowed to do it with intent, then he would be giving him benefit. If Shimon needs to know about what Reuben's doing, then that would be considered that he appointed him. And if he appointed him and Reuben does it, then that would be considered that to be giving him benefit. Yeah, for some reason, actually taking of the truma itself was not considered a benefit. Regarding the neder. But fulfilling the appointment that Shimon would give to Reuven and then taking the truma, that would be considered a benefit. Even though it's hard to imagine that that's considered like a financial benefit. He's not allowed to get any gain from Reuven because of the vow that Reuven took that Shimon can't have any benefit from it. So when Reuven fulfills the appointment, that's considered a gain that Shimon is getting. If Shimon knows that, and he tells Reuven, do this for me, and Reuven does it, so then Shimon is getting a benefit. If Reuven does it without his intent, so then Shimon isn't getting a benefit. Now, the only problem is that he's saving Shimon money, because Shimon would have had to give some of his money to a Kohen. And Reuven is now doing that from his own produce. And we're not considering that a benefit. What about the money that Shimon is gaining? He doesn't have to give to the Kohen. The answer to that is that because Truma could be taken, it doesn't need to be 1 out of 50. It doesn't need to be 2 out of 100, 2%. It doesn't need to be 2%. It could be even much less than that. So because it could be just 1 kernel, and that would exempt the entire silo. So even though he's taking more, but that's just extra. The original din is really just that minuscule amount, and that's not considered enough of a benefit. Just he's saving him that 1 kernel of grain, that's not considered a benefit. That's what we're going to have to say. The question is, but the kernel is also something, right? Which he wasn't allowed to give him. I don't know.
Could it be that that's like Hashem commanded that, so it sees it like it's benefiting Hashem?
Yeah. Now, you have to take that logic into account. That since it's a mitzvah, and mitzvahs aren't done for your benefit, mitzvahs are done just to fulfill the command of Hashem. So we're not considering it that the mitzvah that he's doing for him is considered a benefit. But the fulfillment of the mitzvah is not considered a benefit. Fine. But what about the monetary gain? That's a question that the commentaries are dealing with.
I think that when he is appointed, it's like referring to the gain in like time, because like he's asking the person to do it for him. So
That's
the next
interesting.
person is giving him time. When he does it on his own, like it didn't take that into consideration because it wasn't requested.
Yeah.
Not sure if
Yeah.
that might be
No. So if it's a gain of time, then like you're saying, it would be a problem. Then how could he be allowed to do it on his own? I think the gain when it's requested is the satisfaction that you appointed someone and it got fulfilled. I think there's a satisfaction that that's the prohibition. It must mean that he does not require intention in order to take truma from his own things on the other person. The other person, Shimon, does not need to know about it. So this would be that we have an answer. We have an answer to the question. Can someone take truma from his own produce, on his friend's produce, without the person's knowledge? The answer would be yes. Because you see, that's what's happening in our Mishnah, where the person took a vow not to give his friend benefit, but nevertheless he can take truma. It must be that the person doesn't know about it. That's how we did it.
True, he's taken from his stuff
And now,
for the benefit of his friend.
yeah, and it's not considered. It's not considered that he's giving him any gift by doing that.
It's like the same thing we said before with the machzis hashekel.
Right.
It falls into the
Right.
general-
Right. Now, with the machzis shekel, we explained according to the Ran that the person was exempt from machzis shekel because he had already given machzis shekel, but it got lost. And really, he wasn't obligated to do it again, but he was doing it again anyway. And we were saying that it got lost. It didn't actually make it to the temple. That was the case. So he wouldn't have been obligated. So it wasn't saving him money. The question now comes up is that, but here he's saving him money by doing this. So we're saying that the money that he's saving him is so minuscule that it's not counted. Did I see that? I saw that in the Ran and Hatari Mishlei Shalchberi. No, that wasn't in over there. I saw it in one of the commentaries here. Okay.
It's from Colonel Sanders.
I know. Okay. The Gemara says we don't have a proof. Laila Michel Balakri al Balakri. He wasn't taking his own produce. Over here, he was using the produce of Shimon, of the person that owned the silo, owned the grain. Kedama Rava. And the case is where Rava says, how was he allowed to do it without permission? He wasn't a shliach. If you're going to use the person's produce to take truma, then you have to be a shliach. So we're saying that it's following a statement that Rava made. That Rava said that if a person wants someone to take truma, but he doesn't appoint anyone officially, he just says anyone that wants to take truma can take truma.
Excuse me.
So
Don't
then-
send me messages from that side of the room. It makes my point.
So what's happening here is that he's not considered appointed because he wasn't appointed specifically, but he's still considered a shliach that he's able to do the truma. He has permission to take the truma, but he's not considered appointed as fulfilling a shlichus. Yeah, it's sort of like this middle sort of ground where he's able to take the truma without causing a benefit from him, because since it could have been anyone that does it, the person didn't designate him to do it. It's not considered that satisfaction that he got specifically from him. Okay.
That's for true. Is this on in this case, is it on the person or the thing?
That may be the Gemara's question, the Baila. That's very good.
Very good.
Trophy. Naftali asked, is the truma the mitzvah on the person that his grain should be rectified, should be tithe, what's it called? Or is it just the grain should be tithe, that it's not like a mitzvah, that his grain, it's just mitzvah on the grain? That may be the question.
I think it's on the
That may be the Gemara's question. If it's on the person, then maybe he's taking away his mitzvah. If it's on the grain, then what does the person care? It's just the grain needs to be fixed.
What's the answer?
Well, according to the way we concluded was that we actually don't have an answer. That's what we concluded. We don't have an answer because this case was different. Yeah. Okay. Rabbi Yirmiyah asked Reb Zera a question. Right, Rabbi Yirmiyah is a student of Reb Zera, and Rabbi Yirmiyah has all these interesting questions. He says, let's say there's a grandfather, his daughter married a Kohen, so therefore his grandson is a Kohen. So he comes over to a person and he says, when you take your truma, I'd like for you to give it to my grandson, and here's a coin, that will encourage you to do this, specifically give it. He's paying him to do it. Now the Kohen himself is not allowed to give anything in order to receive the truma. But here he's not a Kohen. The grandfather's a Yisrael. His daughter married a Kohen. His grandson is a Kohen. So there's something called Toivas Hana. There's a certain benefit that he gets. It's like a little token of appreciation for giving it to his grandson. But who's going to own that token of appreciation? This Toivas Hana. Who's going to own it? If one person takes Truma on behalf of his friend, so does the token of appreciation belong to the one that owned the silo, or does it belong to the one that took the Truma? So, mi amrinan ilav perid ha'achmi masachna karidehi. Do we say if not for his produce, Reuven's produce, not for Reuven's produce, then Shimon's silo wouldn't have been fixed, and so therefore it's all Reuven's doing. Or do we say if not for Shimon's silo, then that wouldn't have been Truma? It's all Shimon's silo that causes it to be Truma. So Shimon should get it, that coin. Amalei, so Reb Zeir says, Amakras, Kol Tvas Aracha V'Nasata. Quotes the verse, it says, all the produce of your seed, of your sowing, and you will give. Well, that sounds like it's the produce of Shimon. It's the one that owns the grain, owns the silo, not the one that took the Truma. That's what it sounds like. Eisvei has a question.
But it's not high truma till it's in the side.
Yeah. So, but we're talking about Zaracha, your grain. The Truma of your grain. So that needs to be who's the one that gives it, and which means who's the one that has that right to that token of appreciation is just the one that owns the silo, that owns the actual produce that needs to be fixed. We said that a person that takes a vow, Reuven takes a vow that Shimon cannot benefit from him, Reuven is allowed to take Truma on behalf of Shimon. But if we say that when Reuven does that, who gets the token of appreciation? Shimon. That means Reuven is giving Shimon benefit. What benefit? The benefit that's coming from this grandfather that wants his grandson to get, and that's coming through Reuven doing this. So he's actually giving him indirectly benefit. He's giving him benefit. It must be that Reuven is the one that keeps it. Amri, they said, like, that wasn't the case over there. The case over there was Mishel Balakri, El Shel Balakri. Over there, he was taking the produce of Shimon, giving Shimon's produce, and using Shimon's produce to be the Truma. So of course Shimon is going to get it, because it's all from him. Reuven isn't giving him anything. It was his produce on his own produce. Like we said from Rava. How was Reuven allowed to do that if he was using Shimon's produce? If he was going to be a messenger to do it, a shliach to do it, then that would be giving him benefits. We explained the way Rava said, where Shimon says, anyone that wants is able to take Truma for me. And that way Reuven was allowed to do it, and it's not considered giving Shimon benefit. Tashma, come and listen to Amar Rabavo, Amar Rabbi Yechanan. Rabavo says the name of Rabbi Yechanan, Amakdish, Maisiv Chaimesh, Miskaper Eisiv Truma, Batarim Mishalai al Sheina Shalai, Tevasana Shalai. Turns out that if someone, Rabavo says a few things, but if someone consecrates an item, consecrates something on behalf of someone else. So if he wants to redeem it, so the one that consecrated it has to add the fifth. If the owner redeems something, he has to add a fifth. If someone else redeems it, he doesn't have to. If the owner redeems it, who's the owner? The one that consecrated it. If it was a sacrifice, and there's a rule of Tamura, where you're not supposed to take one animal and say this is going to be exchanged for the sacrifice. The sacrifice would
Even
be
if one is better than the other.
even if one is better, right? But the only person that would be allowed to do that, not allowed, the only person that would be capable of doing that, even though it's not allowed, would be the owner. Now the problem over here is who's the owner, because one person consecrated the animal on behalf of someone else that needed the animal. So who's the owner, and who's the one that's capable of doing Tamura? It's still a prohibition. You're not allowed to, but who's the one that would be capable? So we say miskaper, the one that with the sacrifice was on his behalf.
So he's allowed to substitute?
He's not allowed, but he would be capable of doing that substitution, and then the second animal becomes consecrated.
Both would be.
Both would be consecrated.
If they send them both to pasture or something like that.
It depends what animal it was. Like sometimes they're both brought as a sacrifice. Next thing is that if someone takes truma from his own produce and his friend's produce and Shimon's produce, so who gets the tovus and who gets a token of appreciation of where the truma is given to? That is the one that took the truma. That would be Reuven. Reuven would get it, not the way Reb Zera said. So Reb Yochanan would be arguing on Reb Zera. Another thing that we learned in the Mishnah was. Should I leave this for tomorrow?
Yeah.
Let's leave it for tomorrow. Okay.
Yeah.
Let's leave it.
It's a
Okay.
break.
I have to go down.
Okay.
Go up
Have
and
a good
down,
day,
sir.
everyone.
Thank you. Have a good day.